Hello again, Athish Gaming back with something a little different from my usual Warcraft videos. This will be how to read a 40k datasheet. So, generally speaking, there aren't any videos that are, in my opinion, short enough to just cover all of the basics and get you able to read a 40k datasheet. So, this is how I'm going to cover it. First off, we have the stat line. And here I've listed what all of these things and acronyms mean. So movement in inches, it's pretty obvious. It's how far this unit or model can move. Weapon skill, the number you need to beat on a 6-sided die. So when it says 3+, that means when this model attacks using either weapon skill or ballistic skill, so melee or range, you roll a 6-sided die. If it's 3, 4, 5, 6, then you will hit. That's what a 3+ means. If a model, for example, had a 6+, you would roll a 6-sided dice, and only on a 6 would you hit. So that covers what that is. Strength is, we'll cover this, but this is used to calculate wounding a model. So this is the next step of combat. You rolled a hit, then you rolled a wound, but we're going to cover that next. Toughness is used with strength. They're compared against each other, and it's how hard you are to wound when receiving attacks. Wounds is your HP. So this model, for example, has 3 HP. Each individual model, 3 HP. So you require 3 damage dealt in order to kill the model. Attacks. Attacks is the number of attacks that they get in melee. This does not affect ranged at all. It is only melee attacks. So if you had a squad of 5 of these guys, so 4 heavy intercessors and 1 heavy intercessor sergeant, they would have 4 times 2, 8, and then 3, so 11 attacks. And then leadership is used during a part of combat called the morale phase to determine if models run. I'm not going to get into exactly how it works, but essentially the higher your leadership is, the better. And lastly, save. Save is part of the combat procedure, and it's the last step before damage, and it is whether or not your armor save you can allows you to shrug off the damage that you would take. So this is actually how weapons are represented on a data sheet, and it's very much the same thing. So you have range. This is the weapon's range in inches, and then type. And I only have pistol up here, but there are 4 types of weapons. There are rapid fire, which is double shots at half range. Assault, which can be fired after advancing. Advancing is a special kind of move where you can move further than what's on your data sheet, but normally you can't fire weapons after. Assault weapons can be fired after advancing. Heavy is mostly just a penalty. You have -1 to hit, so if you had a 3+, now you would have a 4+ to hit after moving with a heavy weapon. And pistols can be fired while in combat. So if you are within melee range, you cannot fire guns. Pistols are an exception. And looking at it, we have strength, which is either a modifier. So when it says up here ×2 strength, if this model had 4 strength, it would instead have 8 strength when using this weapon. If it says user, it uses the strength statistic on the previous page. Then we have armor pen. And armor penetration is a counter to the save stat. So on the previous page, we saw that a model had a save of 3+. Now, if they were attacked by this model using an AP -3, that 3+ would change to a 6+. It's a little bit backwards, but basically the easiest way to put it is the save gets worse per point of AP. So AP -1 would turn save 3+ to save 4+. AP -3 would turn save 3+ to save 6+. And lastly, damage. Damage is the amount of damage each successful wound deals. So you can see here we have a 1 damage, we have a D3 damage, and a 2 damage. And D3 is a dice roll. So you would roll a D6 or 6-sided dice, half it, round up, you get the damage. So if you rolled a 5, you'd be dealing 3 damage. If you rolled a 1, you'd be dealing 1 damage. And lastly, we have how actual combat works. Pretty simple, actually. It's just a 4-step process, and that is you rolled a hit. This is using your weapon skill or ballistic skill. So if you had a 3-up ballistic skill, you would be rolling, and every 3-up that you got would count as a successful hit. You take those dice then and you roll to wound. And wound is calculated on a per unit basis. So we have the attacker's strength versus the target's toughness. So if I am strength 4 and the opponent is toughness 4, then it's a 4 plus or a 50-50. If my strength is higher than my opponent's toughness, then it's a 3 plus. If it's double, 2 plus, in the reverse. So the more strength you have versus their toughness, the easier it is to wound them. The less strength you have compared to others, the harder. It's pretty simple, and this is actually a really easy thing to pick up. Is it more? Is it double? Is it less? Is it half? Then we have saves, and this goes to your opponent. So now you've rolled the hit, you've rolled the wound, and you've taken all the successful ones out of those. And let's say you have 4 successes. The enemy will roll their armor saves, and these will just stop the attack if they succeed on them. And this is what the AP modifies. So they have a 3-up save, and you have an AP -1 weapon. Then they're rolling their dices, and if they get above a 4, so 4, 5, 6, then the attack ends, no damage is dealt. If at this point they have failed their save, then you will roll damage if necessary. A lot of weapons have flat damage, so it won't just be rolling damage, it'll just be assigned into the unit. But if not, then you roll the damage, and this is done, it can be done individually. Technically, all attacks are done individually. However, for the sake of convenience and speed, they are almost always rolled bulk. You will always roll just all the attacks of a unit all at once, unless they have different weapons. But that is how to read a 40k data sheet. You have strength, toughness, movement, the kind of weapons they have, and then how those weapons interact with your opponent's saves and toughness. Overall, it's actually pretty simple. This chart is what takes the longest to learn, but once you get it down, it's just second nature. And anyways, that's your very, very short brief on how to read a 40k data sheet.